Welcome to the Major Projects Association podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today by Kate Cairns. Kate is a chartered civil engineer, a sustainability consultant, and fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers. In 2018, she was named one of the top 50 women in engineering by the Daily Telegraph. I recently had a conversation with Kate that really stayed with me. Her strengths and passion and tireless advocacy for safer roads are so inspiring. Road Safety Week is approaching, and it felt like the perfect time to share her story. Kate instigated the CLOCS industry standard and is leading the call for construction logistics, risk management, and safer roads for all, a vital issue for anyone involved in planning, delivering, or managing major construction projects. More of that later, so let's get started. I'm Myrna Rickards, Website Content and Communications Manager at the Major Projects Association, and I'm so pleased to welcome you, Kate.
Thank you, Myrna. It's good to be here.
Kate, you're widely known for your work on road safety, especially construction logistics safety. Can you start by telling us how this became such a personal mission for you?
Yes. Thanks. Thanks for that introduction and acknowledgement as well, Myrna. It's true, I have spoken to scores of policymakers, hundreds of MPs and MEPs, and probably thousands of members of the construction industry on this issue over a decade and a half, as well as journalists and broadcasters. And you mentioned some awards there, and I would gladly give back such awards and the generous testimonials I've received if I could have back my sister. So you asked me why this is a personal mission. I worked on site in the UK and in other countries and off site over 25 years in the construction industry. And during that time, I've seen a really huge improvement in on-site safety, where we've cut deaths by a half and a half again. But what hit me right in the heart on the 5th of February 2009 was the gaping blind spot that I saw in our safety policies, standards and strategies. My little sister, Cairns, was cycling to work. It was a 20-mile round trip that she'd done every day for 3 years. And she was a hugely competent and confident cyclist. And at 4 minutes to 9, she was struck from behind by a fully laden 32-ton tipper lorry. She was dragged and crushed, and she lay pinned by her pelvis under the wheels of that truck. She was fully conscious, and she was asking passers-by, "Please help me. Please help me." 2 hours later, in the Royal London Hospital, after they'd been tirelessly pumping blood into her smashed and severed body, Ailey, my little sister, was pronounced life extinct. And this was the life-changing moment when it became quickly apparent that we have a huge chasm in the way we manage our on-site safety and off-site safety, and that this excellent safety record I'd seen on site was just oblivious off-site, that we have huge complacency about how our construction vehicles are managed beyond the site boundary.
I am so sorry to hear the story about your sister, Ailey. Losing her in that way must have been utterly devastating. When you realised, I understand the investigation didn't lead to any recommended changes or remedies. So what did you discover about what you saw needed to change?
Yes, well, being an engineer and being in construction and working around sustainability and safety and seeing how we apply RIDDOR on site, how we measure slips, trips and falls, we have global safety shutdowns, we have HSE investigations, I was like, okay, right, what's going to happen here? Let's see the police report. Let's hear from the witnesses. It just didn't happen like that at all. The police said they couldn't find any witnesses. They moved the bike immediately after the incident. I said, how was the driver's eyesight? Was he on the phone? We don't know. Oh, well, maybe you could test the driver's eyesight. Maybe we could, but so after 3 months, I realized I hadn't tested the driver's eyesight. And then I requested they did. And 3 months later, they decided to test the driver's eyesight, at which point he completely failed the eyesight test to drive a car. Sorry, to drive a car, never mind a truck, because to drive a truck, you have a more stringent eyesight test. He completely failed that test. And so, yeah, you talk about the outcome of the investigation. The driver was given 3 points on his license and a £250 fine, and he was charged with driving with uncorrected defective vision. He was only charged with that because I had insisted on them testing his eyesight. And so the conclusion from the police investigation was such that my sister's death, being hit from behind and run down, when she was there to be seen, as a witness said she was run down from behind. By the way, I found 2 of the 3 witnesses myself. They found she was run down from behind. The conclusion of the police investigation was that the driver's behaviour on the day had no connection to my sister's death. The coroner ruled that it was not an uncommon occurrence, but that it was an unfortunate accident. And I just could not comprehend when I asked the police about their investigation, and they'd been into the driver's place of work, had they checked the records, and they hadn't done any of that. And I just couldn't comprehend how one of my industry vehicles could run down someone and there actually be no consequences, no meaningful investigation. And it was just like, shit happens. It's an accident. And we can talk about the word accident if you like. But there just seemed a complete disparity between the way on-site deaths handled and off-site deaths. If that truck had run down someone on site, there would have been a full HSE investigation. Because it was on the public road, there was not. So I set up the See Me, Save Me campaign to call for a change. What I came to understand was there was a systemic failure in the justice system, in policy making, and very much so in my own industry, where we employ a huge range of risk management tools on site, mitigating measures, method statements, etc. And when it comes to managing our risk off-site, there was nothing, literally nothing. And so the See Me, Save Me campaign was set up to eliminate HGV risk by challenging the justice system, policymakers, and my industry. And that's where I came to be calling for a new industry standard to manage specifically this risk.
And the risk is certainly there, isn't it? I looked at the CLOCS website and it says nearly 5,000 people are killed or injured every year on UK roads in collisions with construction vehicles. The statistics on collisions is just truly shocking. What do you want people in the construction industry, especially those managing or delivering major construction projects, to understand about where responsibility lies?
This is a really good point, and I think it's the crux of why nothing has historically happened, because firstly, HSC has been within the site boundary, so anything outside the boundary has nothing to do with us. And secondly, we talk about road death and injury as accidents, and I alluded to that a bit earlier. And accidents implies that there's no culpability, implies, well, I didn't mean to, it implies that nothing can be done. I would argue that these are collisions, they are crashes, they are incidents. I never use the term accident in relation to a road incident. We don't say there's a rail accident. We don't say a plane the plane accidentally fell out of the sky, do we? It's a crash, it's an incident, it's an investigation. And so I think partly it's the language we apply to road collisions and this lack of culpability. Yes, no one gets up in the morning meaning to go out and kill someone. However, if we know of the hugely disproportionate risk that you just mentioned then. So I think you mentioned about 5,000 killed or injured. So that's killed or injured, including minor injuries. There are about 250 killed or seriously injured a year. That's life-changing injury. And then there are about 125 fatalities every year. Now, HSE numbers state that there are about 30 to 40 deaths on site every year. So we're killing 4 times as many people off site every year than we are on site. What are we doing about this? What do we know about this? Where is the regulation about this? It's lacking. So what I discovered was that by the time we get to the person behind the wheel on the road at that incident, there's a whole host of measures that we could have put in place to reduce this risk. And so CLOCS is all about driving the responsibility from that driver in that moment up the supply chain to procurement, to planning, so we can use procurement to instigate best practice. So when we're a client and we're setting up a project, when we're procuring the supply chain for a project, is anyone asking the question, how are you managing your construction logistics risk? Where are we implementing best practice? How are we checking out that people are trained and competent? Because actually, there is huge opportunity to turn this risk into a benefit if we apply the CLOCS standard, and if we look at our risk and we look at our opportunities and what we can do. So the responsibility lies, I think the last point is on the driver on the day. The responsibility lies way up the supply chain, well before there's a person in a truck or a spade in the ground. We can do this through, which is why it's so interesting to talk to your audience. We can do this through the procurement of major infrastructure by having those processes in place. And, by the way, we talk about social value. We talk about sustainability. We talk about our people being our biggest asset. How can we possibly say we're implementing social value and at the same time complacently allowing people to be killed under our project vehicle wheels? For me, that's the antithesis of social value, is it not? So we need to be considering this at the highest level and in a strategic way to encompass every part of our project. And the CLOCS brings tools to help us do that.
Well, it sounds like CLOCS has been a real catalyst for change in the industry. Can you remind listeners what CLOCS stands for, and could you give a sense of what's in the standard and what practical changes you'd like to see it bring about?
Yes, that's a good point about, Ailey died in 2009. I went to Brussels with my MEP in 2010 to campaign for cameras and sensors, because every time after time, the driver said, I didn't see them. And so I went to campaign for cameras and sensors to be made mandatory. Talking to drivers and people in the industry, I soon realized that drivers had up to 6 different mirrors to look in. And then now we have a screen to look at. We have alarms going off, and they just had cognitive overload, huge overload. So then I went back to, it was Strasbourg in the beginning. Then I went back to Brussels in 2013 with TfL to campaign for direct vision cabs, low entry direct vision cabs, where drivers can just see out of the window. So first time it was a written declaration, 81, only 10% of written declarations get through. Our declaration got through. That was me, my MEP, and my members of my family and Ailey's friends. We knocked on over 300 doors of MEPs in Europe. And that declaration got through, and the commission came back saying we need more information. And that's when TfL and the wider industry got involved, and we went back to Brussels to call for direct vision vehicles. And that change in legislation, it's going to be 2029 when that comes into force. So that will be exactly 20 years since Ailey died. So that's legislation specifically on the vehicle, which initially I thought was a major issue, which it is. But actually, as I mentioned, there's a whole systemic failure of the way drivers are incentivized, the way we operate on site, the way we design out our risk. So the CLOCS standard was about bringing the industry together. There was a spate of deaths in London in 2012, and that kind of bolstered my campaign. A lot of people came together calling for change, and the industry then came together, and there were about 30, 40 of us in the room at that time, which created the CLOCS standard, which was at the time the construction logistics and cyclist safety standard. But what I failed to mention before was that 15 months after running down Ailey, the same driver went on to run down and kill a pedestrian on a pedestrian crossing.
Really? That is shocking.
She was called Nora Gutman, and she was a 97-year-old Holocaust survivor. So I was becoming rapidly aware that we aren't only running down cyclists, we're actually running down pedestrians. And the stats show that we kill twice as many pedestrians as we do cyclists. So this isn't an issue about, cyclists running red lights and wearing a helmet. This is an issue about risk management. So I don't necessarily talk, I know it's Road Safety Week, but I like to talk about risk management rather than road safety, because safety implies, we say to kids, you need to keep safe, you need to make sure you're seen. But risk management is about, hang on a second, we are the ones that pose the risk. So we are best placed to manage that risk. So CLOCS is now construction logistics and community safety, because we recognise that pedestrians are killed as well, and motorcyclists as well. So that's what CLOCS stands for now, and the standard is about giving guidance to clients and designers and contractors and planners, so each stakeholder in the supply chain, what we can do, how we embed it in procurement, and how we can embed it in the planning process as well through a construction logistics plan, how we write a construction logistics plan, and that delivers CLOCS throughout the construction process and down the supply chain.
Many of our listeners work across the UK on major projects in planning and design and delivery and operations. So what can they do to support this standard and make a difference?
Yeah, that's a great question, because exactly, it's every, I think the point is that every person has a part to play, wherever they are, whether in the planning, the design, the delivery, or the operations. This is not about logistics operators and trucks and drivers. It is way, way beyond that. So I think I would love your listeners to, I'm open to having conversations with any of your listeners, but I think the first thing they need to look at is where they are now, where they sit, what is their awareness. I apply, so I'm a freelance speaker and trainer and consultant, and I apply an awareness, acceptance and action model with my clients. So first of all, we have to know where we are. What is our level of awareness? Do we even know about this issue? Or we do know about this issue? What are we actually doing about it? Do the right people know about it? So firstly, awareness, and that's where, I often tell my story. You just got a little snippet of it today, but I tell my story and the journey and what happened. So awareness of the issue, acceptance and acknowledgement of our part to play. So not, cyclists shouldn't run red lights and they should put helmets on, but what are we doing? What's the risk that we pose, and how can we change that? And then we can start looking at the action that we can take. So the first thing is to look at identifying our own risk, and then what is our part, what we can do, and then what is the action. And the CLOCS standard can help do that, because it gives that guidance to the different stakeholders. I also helped RTPI write a guide for Royal Town and Planning Institute, CLOCS for planners, as well as I do a lot of work at the Institution of Civil Engineers, as you mentioned. We wrote a guide for designers as well, CLOCS guide for designers. So there's a huge amount of information around, and CLOCS is a format, a framework, if you like, to help different stakeholders get involved to play their part.
Are you seeing that companies who are now using this standard are talking to each other and sharing stories and best practice?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, when you become a CLOCS champion, a CLOCS member, we're bringing like-minded people together and we're sharing best practice, and we have forums where we share that best practice. This is a tragic, terrible, depressing situation that brings trauma and violence. And, I speak from my story. But as we said, for every one of me, Ailey, in fact, Ailey's colleagues were affected. Witnesses on the street were affected. When I did my witness appeal, a woman came with 2 little girls and they were looking up at me sort of quizzically. And she told me that they'd said to her, "Oh, Mummy, is that the lady that was lying on the road last week?" And she told them that I was, because obviously I looked a bit like my sister, and that I was okay and that I'd got better. But she told me that these girls had had nightmares ever since. They had to go and see a counsellor. They had to get therapy. This is just 2 little girls that were walking by in the street. How do we calculate the cost, that untold hidden cost, the ripple effect of these collisions? But when we apply best practice, when we assess our risk, when we implement the CLOCS standard, when we educate our supply chain, when we monitor and enforce it, then we can actually turn these negatives into positives. We have a better reputation when we look at other sustainable modes of travel, because the first thing we do is look at eliminating the vehicles. Can we use the river? Can we use rail? Can we use conveyor belts? And when we apply the CLOCS standard and look at construction logistics, we can actually look at more sustainable modes. We reduce our carbon emissions, we reduce our embodied carbon, we reduce our impact on climate, we are quicker, we are less congestion, it costs less, our drivers are happier, our public's happier, and we can use this as an opportunity to talk to the public rather than be defensive about it. So very much it can be used as a tool to realise those opportunities rather than just a tool for reducing risks. I think we're seeing that, and those that apply CLOCS, there's some statistics from Camden that when they applied CLOCS, they saw a 37% reduction in collisions, but also 47% reduction in complaints to the council. Which local authority is not going to want a reduction like that in complaints? That's money and time saved already. So huge benefits available by applying the CLOCS standard.
Useful to know all these positives that have come out of such a tragedy. If there's one key message you'd like our listeners to take away today, one thing you'd like them to remember, what would that be?
I think, I've taken a tragic situation in my life, a profound personal tragedy, and I've tried to turn it, it's changed the course of my personal life and it's changed the course of my professional life. And I've tried to take this pain and turn it into a passion for change. And, I don't think you'll find anyone more passionate about this issue than me. And what I'd like your listeners to appreciate and believe is that they probably, if they're involved in major projects, they probably have a part to play somewhere. And I want them to feel empowered to take action, to speak up. And that might just be asking a question. That might just be saying, hey, how are you ensuring that the vehicles delivering to our projects are operating safely? Do we know that they are? Does anyone know? Has anyone asked the question? And maybe that one question can be the catalyst for change, because I believe we all have a part to play. And one wise person said, only a fool learns by his mistakes. A wise man learns from the mistakes of others. So are we going to wait for it to happen to us when we know what the likelihood is? We know that likelihood is huge, hugely disproportionate risk. We know the consequences are catastrophic. You're likely to be killed under a truck when it's only traveling at 2 miles per hour because of the huge mass and weight and the huge blind spots around this truck, these traditional trucks. So feel empowered, get educated, and take action, because we don't want to be the ones with one of our drivers behind that wheel, or even worse, one of our loved ones under the wheel. It's traumatic, and I'm all about taking that experience and turning it. That's why I do my workshops. That's why I do a training. That's why I speak about my story, because in this way I can help others and bring about the change that I want to see. And we've made huge progress, but there's more to be done. So I just encourage people to think about their part, their situation, and reach out to me, reach out to CLOCS, check the CLOCS website, check the CLOCS standard, because there's a lot of information out there now, which I've helped design and deliver and evolve, which was not there in 2009. So we're in a much better place now than we were. And so there's much still to be done.
Kate, thank you so much for sharing your story and your passion with us today. I hope this conversation inspires everyone listening to play their part in making our roads and our construction industry safer for all. We'll include links to CLOCS and ways to get involved in the show notes. Thanks again, Kate, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in to the Major Projects Association podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Myrna, and thank you everyone for their time and attention, precious time and attention. It's been great to be here.